And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Adam Miller, who has had 3 near-death experiences, which we're going to talk about and more. Adam, thank you for joining me and welcome.
Thank you, Jeff, for having me today.
Adam, I think we need a little bit of backstory before we get into your first NDE. So can we start there, please?
Yeah, so I grew up in the 60s and 70s, basically. I'm 65 years old. And in my young life, I started figure skating at 2 years old and was coming up through the ranks of figure skating for, many, many years. I had a tyrannical father that pretty much beat me to death. And so I think it was probably 31 or 32 visits to the hospital because of that. And the figure skating was the only thing that really, saved me physically and emotionally through that whole abuse, I think. Also, when I was about 15 or so, I had a girlfriend who we were at this party, and she seemed kind of off at the party. And so I didn't see her for a few minutes, and she came back, and she was kind of lethargic, and she was lying in my arms, and I was talking to her. And what I didn't know is that she had taken an entire bottle of barbiturates. And so she actually passed away, actually died in my arms when I was 15. And so that was my first experience with any kind of death right in front of me. And, when these things happen, our mind doesn't have the ability to understand, where you go. So I had no grip on that for a long time, and I had a lot of, feelings of sadness about her and various other things. But I kept skating, and I kept myself up. I did a lot of competition work. So by the time I was 18 years old, I had pretty much gotten tired of my father's abuse. So he had just beaten me that morning, and I used to be in this archery class. And so, something comes over a person when they reach the breaking point about abuse, which is why I feel this is, important in my story. And I just walked to my back room and grabbed my bow and arrow, and I walked out, and I pulled it back, and I shot it through my father's left lung, actually, and damn near killed him. And then I just very calmly walked up to him and said, you ever do that again, you're dead. You're not going to beat me anymore. And it was really, I think, the beginning of changing and becoming from, an abused person to a person of substance internally, to where I felt like maybe I did have some value. And by the way, he never did beat me again. So I graduated from high school, and I had a grandfather that I was very close to. They lived in Arkansas. And I used to go back to Arkansas from the time I was little all the way through 18 and learned how to farm. They had a great cotton farm. They had 10,000 acres there. And I really learned a lot there about how to take care of yourself. Driving a tractor at 11 years old, and learning how to sow seed, and learning how to milk a cow, learning how to fish, learning how to drive, etc. So I felt all those things were very, very important. And that was a pivotal year because my grandfather died that year. So there again, I had another feeling about things. But I had no idea what was to come. You're kind of going along in your life and you're not really thinking too much about what's happening. I mean, I was such a good figure skater. I could do 7 triples, backflip, double axel, all that kind of thing. People used to call me a skating god. Everybody said you're a skating god, so I thought I was a skating god, right? And to be honest, I really didn't have a lot of time to think about God. It was something like I grew up as a Methodist, so I'll probably leave it there on that. And I just didn't have time for it. So figure skating, to give you kind of a schedule on that, I did 6 days a week. I skated from 6 o'clock in the morning till about 9:30. Then I went to school till 3, and then I skated till about 9 o'clock at night or so. And then on the weekend, it was 12 hours a day. So I didn't have a lot of young life, like natural childhood. Pretty much spent it on the rink. So there I am. I'm 18 years old and finally thinking about, what am I going to do with my skating career? I wasn't real sure about it. I wasn't a good enough skater to go into national competition. I was more of a regional competitor. So I was thinking along these lines. I decided to go to Los Angeles, and I was taking from one of the world Olympic coaches there because I was trying to figure out what direction to take the skating. And in order to go up to the next level, I would have had to gone from triple jumps to quadruple jumps at that time. So that would have been 1977, 78, somewhere in there. And what I didn't understand is that I was over skating. And what over skating means is that you are not putting enough nutrient in your body to sustain the amount of hours that it takes to do those big jumps and to spend that many hours on the ice. So this is where my near-death experience happens. I was skating. It was about 7:30 in the morning, and I went up to do a jump, and the world went black. So I don't really remember anything from the hitting the ice because I was turning in the air, and I hit the ice unconscious, going 20 miles an hour, 6 feet in the air, rotating. So you can imagine, the type of damage. Broke my nose, dislocated my shoulder, and broke my right ankle, all in just that fall, because I was thoroughly unconscious. So I woke up in the hospital in Los Angeles, and there were doctors and nurses looking down upon me and saying, okay, well, you have a lot of complications here, because they had already set the shoulder and took care of the nose and so on. However, the real problem is that my lungs were full of, blood and pus up to about 3/4. So I had maybe 15% of room to breathe, and my oxygen was probably 20 or somewhere in there. And the other issue was that I had a tremendous amount of fever. And so they said, look, we're going to have to reduce the fever. The fever was about 107, which, as most people know, you don't have to have any medical training to know that that level will kill you. And they needed to reduce that fever. So they put me in a vat of ice. In the 70s, they didn't know a lot about, how your body regulates after that. They don't do that any longer, by the way. So that's an old practice. And here's why. So they put me in the ice, and the temperature dropped, of course, down to about maybe 99 or so. And then when they took me back up out of the ice, it raced up just in seconds to 109. And 109 is death. You You don't survive that. And so my heart stopped. I get goosebumps when I talk about this. It's just really intense. And the next thing that happened is spectacular. I just woke up in another dimension, obviously. And there was a man standing there. He was about 6 feet tall and beautiful, sort of this glow around this person. He was kind of just standing there with his arms crossed, tapping his foot. And it was like he was waiting for me. He knew I was going to be there. And of course, my first question was, where the hell am I? I had like no clue about anything. I'm an 18-year-old child. I have no identification of any of this. And he said, okay, well, I'm going to take you to a place. And they're going to be very specific about, what's going on.
What did the realm look like that you were in?
Yeah, so that first realm where the man was standing, it was white. Yeah, so it was just white. And from that space, when he said, I'm going to take you to a place, then we were in the next space. Okay, so that space was like totally different. So that space was very vast, I would say. There was a building there. The building, it looked like a church, very much so. Huge, 500 or 600 feet tall by several miles long, I would say. There weren't really any windows like you would think of on Earth. However, there were these stairs that were in front of this building. And he said, listen, we're going to walk up these stairs together. And I want you to pay attention to what the stairs do. I'm scratching my head. I'm like, well, I don't know what that means. Also, too, suffice to say, because a lot of people ask me this next question, what did it feel like to not be in the body, right? So what's that like? That's a very interesting thing. When you're not in the body, you don't have the idea of weightlessness. So that's not occurring. However, when I looked down to my hand, I could see through it. So I definitely was in a spirit form. So that's to answer that question. And you have a sense of weight somewhat. In other words, you're you still. You don't change. You just don't have the flesh. You're still yourself. So back to the story, we started to walk up these stairs, and each and every stair that I put my foot on lit up in millions and millions of tiny stars. It was just absolutely wonderful, spectacular. There were 72 stairs, and I found out later that 7 and 2 in the universe is a sacred number. So that is a complicated description, and I'll have to cover it some other time. So I got to the landing, or the top of the stairs, and this gentleman that I described earlier said, I will return later. However, right now, you need to go in the building. So I walked up to the building, and the doors just opened pretty much on their own. And when I walked in this building, it's still, even right now, we're talking 1977, right? So it's 40 years ago. Even right now, as I tell the story, it's like it happened yesterday because of what happened next. So the minute I got inside this building, the entire building was full of angels. There were several different types of them. So there were these small angels about like that size. And they all had different colored wings. And I learned later that the coloration in the wings is a level of achievement by that particular being, right? So blue, red, yellow, green, etc. And then the next level of angels were something that a lot of people know well, and it's also in the Bible, are the seraphim angels. Okay, so the seraphim angels are human-esque, so they're about 6 feet. They also have the different color of wings depending on their level of achievements. And then in the 4 corners of the building, there were the mighty archangels. I'm sure, Jeff, you know what those are. And their job was to guard the 4 corners of the buildings. And they were about 200 feet tall. And they were interesting. Instead of having colored wings, they had a spear, and leggings to cover like armor, pretty much, and a breastplate, and a shield, and all that material was a color, depending upon what their jobs were. So I walked through the building to the end of it. And at the end of it, there was a podium there. On my far left, there sat a woman, and she was very, very, very beautiful. And then next to her, there were many others. So I'll give a brief description of that. So on the far left, there was what I believed, and I still believe, would be Mother Mary. So a lot of people know her well, and she had a very beautiful halo, different colors of the rainbow. It was really gorgeous. And next to her was another deity called Kuan Yin, which is more of the Eastern deity. There was also the great Buddha Law there, who I studied for many years now, and a guy named Saint Germain. And there were other angelic type hosts like Gabriel, Michael, etc. So the woman motioned me forward and said that I was in the place of change, the hall of change, where all humans, when they either are entering or exiting a body in some form, or partially exiting, which was in my case, they come to see them, and they're called, the people in the podium are called the Holy Council. And she explained to me that I was only there for a visit, and that I needed to make some choices in this situation. So I listened to her very carefully, and she described many things about how the universe runs, about how it works, and what some of my choices were. And one of the choices is that I could go to what's called the Universal College. And I love education. I'm educated in psychology as a human now. And when I heard about this college, I was like, I have to go there. I have to go there. And so I made the choice to go. I made the choice to go there. And they said they would have a couple of things for me to do when I came back from school. So I went to the school for a period of what we could safely say is about 2 weeks Earth time. That's my guess. And I went to many, many, many classes. Some were mathematics, some were universal law, some were various understandings about how and why and where humans actually go, and so on and so forth. And I became very educated. All the educators were pretty interesting. The halls for education were similar to a college, where you have the seating, theater type seating, except there was about 1 million souls in each in each class. And so I went through all my classes, to make a long story short. And after I went through all these classes, and I actually got a graduation certificate, which is pretty interesting. And I went back to the Hall of Change, where the holy ones are.
When you finally came back, did you bring all that knowledge with you?
I did.
All right.
Every shred of it.
Maybe we'll talk about that later.
Okay. I'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
Nobody's ever asked me that question, by the way. not even my clients.
Hmm.
So then as I was standing before the holy ones, once again, they said, we want you to do something and we want you to see something here quickly. So she was holding a book. She said, this is your book of life. This is the book that every single human writes before they start a lifetime on Earth. And it's a basic outline of what kind of experiences you would like to have. You also do other things. You choose your parents, you choose your skin color, you choose even tiny things like possible religion, the country of origin where you're going to arrive in, and also how long your life will be, etc., etc.
Sounds like they put your soul contract into a book.
Actually, I wrote it. So to be clear on this, what happens is before you come, because the holy ones, I need to say this, the holy ones do not get into anybody's free will. They are not allowed to do that. That's against universal law. They cannot interfere with anything that you decide before you come here or after it or during it. They can help people along the way, which we'll talk about in a little while, but they cannot interfere. So she handed me this book. And at the top, it said, Life's Beginnings and Life's Experiences by Adam Miller. And it was really interesting because it's in my own handwriting, of course. It starts with my birth. It starts with where I will arrive. It starts with who my parents are, so on and so forth. And it goes down through the details. Now, the interesting thing about my particular book, however, is it only went till 18. I had never written in there anything beyond 18 years old. And I realized as I was standing there, that's why I was there. I hadn't written anything past that. So the great Mother Mary said to me, what would you like to have in there? And why do you want to go back? So I proceeded to write in there my life's goals and what I wanted to do and what I wanted to continue with. And I wrote the rest of it up to when I would pass on. I do know when my passing is. So what that did is that gave me all of a sudden the control, right? To understand that we write our own life, that we're in charge of our own lives, that nobody's doing anything out there to control us in any way, and that we have the free will to become whatever it is we desire, right? So it really changed my whole idea about what and who we are and where we come from, for sure. So then I handed the book back to the holy ones, and they said, yes, this is complete. And we would like to tell you the next thing. So the next thing is that they removed the veil between myself and holiness. I don't have one. And I haven't had a veil since 1977. So 24/7, I can actually hear, feel, and see the great holy ones all the time, day, night, driving the car, whatever. So I can actually see all of that.
In what way do you see these beings?
So may I come to that in just a little bit?
Sure.
So after that, because this is how basically. So after that, they said it's time to go back to Earth, right? So it's time to go back to the sphere. So there wasn't any tunnel, there wasn't any whoosh, or there wasn't any kind of experience really. I just was back in the bed in the hospital, just boom, like nothing ever happened. So about 2 days went along, and I spit out all the pus in the blood within 2 days, which is ridiculous. It's unheard of. I should have been there for 6 months. And that third day, which is very interesting because it was a Sunday. So whether that has anything to do with the 7 days of Christ, I'm not sure. But it did in my case. So I was laying in the bed and I would be leaving within like 3 days. And all of a sudden I saw, remember the man I told you about in the beginning of the story who met me?
Yes.
He was standing at the foot of the bed. right? So he's standing at the foot of the bed, and he says to me, I need to tell you who I am. I am Jesus the Christ, and that's how you would know me from not only from now on, but you would also be able to identify me by vibration and by feeling, by tone of voice, and by color, which is interesting because Jesus actually exudes a light golden color. Each one of what I call the holy ones has a color to them, a tone, a feeling, and so on, so that I can identify each one. So that's basically the end of my first death experience. And then I left the hospital and I went into the holiday on ice in Europe. And then it goes from there. Now, if you'd like to hear the other two death experiences.
Sure.
Things were going pretty well. However, again, kind of like with figure skating, I wasn't paying an awful lot. I have a tendency not to pay attention to myself. I mean, I think all of us do as humans. We have a tendency to neglect this. It's very easy to put out for others when you're a caregiver, but it's not very easy to take care of yourself. And there again, I think I was probably overworking a bit. And I was married to a young lady in about 1996, and I was living in Walnut Creek, California. I had a family, and I was carrying a couch actually down some stairs because we were moving. And all of a sudden, once again, the world just went black. And so me and the couch like took a trip down the stairs together. And so I hit the bottom stair, and then the couch actually hit my face and actually broke the bones in the sinus areas. And there were some other damages too. Now I was completely unconscious. I had no idea what happened. Now, once again, I woke up in the emergency room in Walnut Creek, California, and the doctors told me my appendix exploded. So when my appendix exploded, that caused what's called peritonitis. Peritonitis is blood poisoning. And so I had blood poisoning, I mean, throughout. It just, when it exploded, they said that my appendix was the size of a baseball. So it was really, I probably had that condition for many, many years and just had no clue about it. So back on the table again, right? And I died on the table once again. And again, the same gentleman who I now knew as Jesus was waiting. And he said, listen, we need to take you to a different type of place. So they took me to a different type of place, and that place is called the place of waiting. And the reason you go there is it's kind of a sanatorium for souls who have an ability to be able to see, hear, and feel, and they're doing something with it, but they're not listening to their own needs, and they're not listening to their own things that that's required to sustain life. So they took me to basically counselors there, who are holy beings also, and they re-instructed me on how to pay attention and to be very, very careful about when I touch people. So they brought something up with me, which is really important. What I learned in that particular situation is that I had touched a particular person who had periodontal disease, which is, in the mouth and so on, and had blood poisoning. And somehow I had taken on the energy of that illness. And in my body, it manifested itself in a way in which I became ill. because when you're doing any kind of spiritual work whatsoever, I need to say this to everybody here. If you're going to do spiritual work and you touch anybody, you had better be very, very, very protected by holiness and make sure that none of their crap gets into your body, because it can very easily if you're not careful. So they re-instructed me on how to take care of that. So I got re-instructed. I came back onto the table. I went through the whole procedure and they cleared out all the bad blood that was in the body, and I was back in the hospital. So that's the second death experience. And I did pretty good. I recovered well, and I got out of the hospital in about 3 or 4 days, which with appendix things is not that uncommon. So an interesting thing happened though. I realized the other reason that I got sick. And the other reason that I got sick is I was in a really, really bad marriage. It wasn't abusive or any of that. It's just that the woman that I was with was not a healthy person, and was very neurotic and very clinging and very negative and so on and so forth. And she also had a teenage daughter that was like that as well. And so I was not in a healthy person, even though I was working in a healthy way. I did not have a balance of the light and dark that's in the universe. And one of the things I want to say about that is that our universe is actually in a perfect balance of light and dark. That is its superstructure. That's actually how it's made. And so it has both the light and the dark side in order to be able to function. It is a misnomer and a misunderstanding that, everything is hearts and roses out in the universe. It doesn't work that way. And one of the ways that we can, understand that that's the truth is, if that was the case, why would we have archangels? Because archangels' principal job is to protect against the dark, right? So we wouldn't need them if that was the case. So I went back to work, and I got an immediate divorce. Right, I got an immediate divorce. I was out of there because I knew that it was an extremely unhealthy situation, and I didn't want to become ill because of it again. So would you like to go to the next death experience?
Sure. I'd like to fast forward to that.
So I worked through the 90s and through the 2000s. And let's see. So I'm now married. I have 3 children. And I've been married for going on 15 years. And so about 5 years ago, I had a genetic default that I did not know was in our family tree. And I came to find out later that I had 4 uncles that all died of what I'm going to talk about. So in this situation, it wasn't because I did anything to myself. It was just genetics. So this was 5 years ago, and I was walking down the hallway. We were living in Reno, Nevada, actually, I think. And because I had a lot of clients there, and I hit the floor, just boom, out. Again, back in the hospital. Boy, I did an awful lot of hospital time now that I think about it. And I woke up there, and of course the doctor was looking at me. I'll never forget. He was this, German guy with a heavy German accent. Do you know what's wrong with you? And do you know what's happening? And I'm like, no, I don't know. Okay, I don't know anything. Because it was instant. He said, you have a pulmonary embolism, which is a blood clot next to the heart. And it was a very serious one, and it had taken my oxygen down to 22. And he said, we have to do immediate surgery, obviously, microsurgery, in order to remove it. So they wheeled me in there. I was in there for 8.5 hours, I believe. And I died 3 times. So my heart actually completely stopped because of no oxygen. And this one was really interesting. So it was not like the other experiences. It was much different. It was more like I was on the table and then I did what a lot of other people say, where you're floating above the doctors and you can see everybody working. That was my first experience of that. And then I went away. And that was more like a multidimensional visit. So I saw a lot of angelic hosts out there, just kind of out there. There wasn't really any buildings or anything. And they were pretty much just watching over my spirit as I went through this really intense surgery. And I just kind of kept going out there and I kept going out there and I went out there. I think the 3 times I found out I died later. And that was absolutely, just so everybody knows this, that was spectacular. Very, very beautiful angelic hosts. Some of them were blue, some of them were kind of crimson red, and some of them were golden, some of them were orange, green, and so on. Obviously, they all had different kinds of jobs and so on. I did not see Jesus the Christ in that particular situation. I've often thought since that one that because it wasn't as traumatizing and as sudden as the first two, I think that I was more earthbound. In other words, I was a little bit closer to Earth during it, and I didn't go as far away. And it was a beautiful, spectacular situation and glorious, and very, very happy to have had that one. I can't say the same for having an embolism. You know, the other thing I want to mention about all these death experiences that I need to tell people, all right, because I've had foolish clients say things to me like, maybe I should have a death experience. And I'm like, are you insane? Do you have any idea, how sick you have to be to have it? It's not pleasant. There's nothing good about dying. It's extremely horrible. It's terrible, awful. You check with anybody with a near-death experience, they're going to tell you that very same thing. And here's the other part that I think I want people to know about returning, because I really didn't talk about that. So it's great and groovy to be out there and with holiness. However, you have to come back if you want to be here. And so here's the thing about it. When you come back into your screwed up body that you left, it is absolutely horrible. It is like being in a train wreck. When you slam back down into that body, it's just terrible. It's just the worst jolt you'll ever feel ever. So, I need people to understand this is a really, really intense thing you are talking about. This is not casual. It's not easy. It is a miracle and glorious, but it's also horrid.
Adam, after watching this podcast, people may want to reach out to you and ask you questions. Are you
Sure.
open to that? Well, I guess that's a yes. What's the best way to reach
Sure. Yeah, so we are at www.discoverwholeness.com, I believe is the website.
you? Do you fear death at all?
Well, can I put it this way?
You can put it whatever way you want.
Well, let's put it like this. Let's say you're driving your car and some idiot pulls out in front of you. You're going 80 miles an hour and they damn near kill you. Yeah, definitely. So in that way, yes. I'm not interested. Listen, I've been in sudden death 3 times now, and it's not fun. So yeah, do I want to go there? No. Getting out there, yes. Once you're there, I know that it's glorious. I know that we're protected. I know that there are holy beings waiting for us. I know that they have all the answers we ever wanted to ask about anything, including our own lives or any other thing. So that's like a 2-part thing, right? On the one end, no, I don't want bodily harm. Nobody does. On the other end, yeah, when I'm thoroughly looking forward to, I call it home. I believe at this point that the universe is our real home and that the earth is just temporary. And because I believe that so much, I think that it is an important thing to say that we're just an illusion, this whole entire thing. It's only going to last like that. And then we move on. The other thing I didn't want to forget to tell you was I think I mentioned I was going to say something about Buddhism, right? So, Jeff, I had spent 1 year in about 2003 at a Buddhist monastery. I completely checked out of the world totally. And I went to the Buddhist monastery in California, and I gave up all my belongings, and I stopped figure skating for 1 year, and I was a Buddhist monk for a year. And in that time, I learned just so much about the internal part of what we are. I mean, I had 12-hour meditations. They had you sit in the snow with no clothing on. You had to do 500 push-ups every day. And it was a very, very, very rigorous schedule. And it's 7 days a week for a year. And it is spectacular. I can tell you it's not for everybody.
Was this after your first NDE?
Yes, 2003. So I had, a pretty good understanding, of what I wanted there. Yeah, I knew why I was there.
Do you have any evidence or do you believe in reincarnation? And if so, why do we keep coming back over and over again?
Yeah, that's a spectacular question, isn't it? And I think it's I think it's one of the main ones why people are curious. You know what I mean? Even if they don't have a lot of curiosity about what happens after you die or any of that stuff, they're like scratching their head going, what the hell? What am I doing here? Right? Well, one of the things that happened when I was in the Universal College, yes, is they gave an entire course on that. And so basically what they explained is that we do in fact do one lifetime after another in order to gain spiritual knowledge in a more difficult setting, because it's very easy. There's an old saying, right? A Buddhist monk can sit on top of a mountain and learn things because they have no interruption, right? But what happens when you come into the public? What happens when you have computers and you have cars and you have a job and you have children and you have a wife, you have a husband, you have whatever? How in the world do you actually learn anything? Well, what I learned in that school is that is the learning. That is the message. In other words, what we're doing is every single second that we're on this planet in an embodiment, we are actually learning mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Every second we're here. And we're using this as just another type of schooling. And that's the way that works. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
I feel like it's an important place we are. We need to understand that the earth is a school. It's not anything else. A lot of people are saying, oh, it's hell. No, it's just a place of learning. That's all it is. When I went out and had my death experience, that's just a different place of learning, right? It's not anything else. I learned there and I learn here. We learn there and we learn here.
When you say that this is all an illusion,
Yeah.
could you go as far as saying that this is all a simulation?
You mean like a matrix?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Because once you start talking, multidimensionally, there are so many dimensions that are actually operating together simultaneously to make the universe work. Now, if I'm going to sit here and go, well, I know, nobody knows how the freaking universe works. That's ridiculous. Okay. No, We're just a little speck, on a little tiny planet floating around in the middle of nowhere, basically. However, that nowhere has a mathematical grid to it. And it is all put together like a puzzle in a certain fashion to operate in a certain way in order to get the result. And what the result is creation. The universe is a place of creation. The universe is a place of growth. The universe is a place of change. It is ever changing and ever moving and ever evolving. And so, since that's the case, that must mean we as humans are doing the same thing. Absolutely.
Adam, before we finish up, can you leave
Yes,
us
sir.
with one last positive message?
I think the real message of anybody who has had a near-death experience and goes through the hideousness and the glory of that, they owe the rest of humanity something from there on. And what they owe is the obligation to be able to tell their experience and what they're doing with it. Because all people who have a death experience, they're changed. They're forever changed from that day. And because of that, what ends up happening is your message now is a responsibility. Now you have one. Before, you may have felt like you were floating around or whatever. You don't have that excuse anymore because you know better. Once you've been out there and you come back and you see what's going on, you cannot keep that to yourself. And the message is get out there and tell your story, and tell your story as soon as you can so that we can help. Our world is in such a freaking mess. It's just horrible. Whether you're talking about Ukraine or you're talking about politics, whatever, it doesn't make any difference. We need to unite as people. And the only way that that's going to happen is if we tell our story. That's a fact.
Adam, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
Thank you, sir. I would be happy to talk to you anytime. I really, really like you. You're a fine man. You really are.
Thank you, Adam. Appreciate that. Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.